"Sir, be my husband for one day," asked the black maid. The Mafia boss melted. "Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main characters. Maya Harris was nothing more than a maid, cleaning floors in one of the most luxurious houses in New York. A house filled with wealth, power, and secrets that Maya would never be allowed to touch. As she dusted the grand chandelier, her heart beat fast with the thought that her life would remain forever out of reach from the world inside this mansion. The Mafia boss, Vince Romano, was her employer, and though he barely noticed her, his presence filled the entire house like a heavy cloud. He was cold, distant, a man who ran the city's criminal empire with an iron fist. People feared him, and she, a simple maid, had always kept her distance. But today Maya had a plan. She had no other choice. The past few months had been filled with secrets and lies. Lies she had told her family about her life. Lies that made her feel like she was suffocating in her own skin. It all started when her mother, sick and struggling to make ends meet, called and asked her when she would introduce the man who supposedly changed her life. Maya, terrified of the judgment, had told them a lie. She had said she was married, and her husband was a successful businessman. But now, with her family planning a reunion and expecting to meet him, Maya's lie had come crashing down. With no man to present, she had to act fast. She had no one to turn to, no one to help her. In a desperate moment, Maya found herself standing in front of Vince Romano's office door. She had cleaned the room dozens of times, but today, it felt different. She knocked once softly. When Vince's deep voice called for her to enter, she stepped inside, her heart pounding. Vince was sitting behind his massive mahogany desk, his sharp features barely illuminated by the dim light from the city skyline outside. His eyes, dark and calculating, locked onto her as she nervously approached. She couldn't help but feel small in his presence, but her desperation outweighed her fear. "Sir, be my husband for one day," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible. The words felt like they would suffocate her as soon as they left her mouth. Vince didn't respond immediately, and for a moment, the silence felt like a lifetime. His eyes narrowed, a look of confusion mixed with curiosity in his gaze. Maya's heart raced. She had no idea what would happen next, but she was certain of one thing. There was no turning back now. She had asked the impossible, but maybe, just maybe, Vince Romano, the man who controlled everything, would say yes. The silence between them stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Maya stood frozen, waiting for Vince's response. She had no plan for what would happen if he rejected her. She hadn't even thought that far. Her whole world seemed to narrow to the moment, to the man seated across from her, his sharp gaze piercing through her. He didn't say a word, but the weight of his stare made her second-guess everything she had just said. She shifted uncomfortably, her palms beginning to sweat. "You want me to pretend to be your husband?" Vince finally spoke, his voice smooth, almost casual. The coolness in his tone only made Maya more nervous, but she steadied herself. She had to be strong now, for her family, for herself. "Yes," she replied, her voice trembling only slightly. "Just for one day? Please. My family expects it." Vince studied her for a moment longer, his gaze never wavering. It was as if he were trying to figure her out, trying to understand why she would ask such a thing. But then, unexpectedly, he leaned back in his chair, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "I don't know if I should be flattered or confused," he said softly, though his tone was anything but mocking. "But why me? Why not anyone else?" Maya's heart pounded as she struggled to find the right words. Because you're the only one who can help me. You're the only one who wouldn't judge me for lying, for pretending. I can't go back to my family without something to show them." She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "You have power, you have respect. No one will question it if you just play along." Vince's expression shifted slightly, the smile fading as he looked at her with something approaching curiosity. "You're asking me to play a role, to be a man in a story that's not mine," he said, his voice low but deliberate. "Why do you think I'd do that for you?" Maya hesitated, but then she saw something in his eyes, something that shifted in that moment. He wasn't looking at her with contempt, not with the cold detachment he often wore around others. For the first time, his gaze softened, just enough for her to feel like he was seeing her, not as a maid, not as an employee, but as a person. Because, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, maybe for one day, you could be someone else too. Someone who's not tied down by the weight of this world. Just for one day, you could feel something else, something different. Vince's gaze didn't leave hers, and Maya could almost see the gears turning in his mind. He didn't speak for a long time, and Maya's nerves began to eat away at her. She couldn't tell if he was considering her request or simply toying with her. Finally, Vince broke the silence. All right, he said, his voice steady and sure. One day, just one day, but there's a price. Maya's heart skipped a beat, and she nodded quickly, desperate. Anything, she said, not fully understanding the weight of what she was agreeing to. You'll do what I say, when I say, he added, his tone firm, commanding. This won't be a game to me, Maya. It's a business transaction. Understood. Maya swallowed hard, but she nodded. Understood. Vince stood up then, the moment suddenly becoming more real, more tangible. He was still the Mafia boss, still the man who controlled everything around him. But in this moment, with her request hanging between them, he was something else too. He wasn't the powerful, untouchable figure he often appeared to be. And as Maya stood there, trying to steady her breath, she realized that, for better or worse, this one day was going to change everything. The next day felt surreal to Maya. What had started as a desperate plea, a simple request, had somehow become reality. She had expected Vince to go through the motions, to pretend for a few hours, but nothing about this felt fake. The way he had spoken to her, the way he had agreed without hesitation, it was like he truly understood the weight of her request. Maya spent the morning getting ready, standing in front of the mirror, unsure of what to wear, of how to look. It wasn't just about the clothes. It was about how she was supposed to act. She had always been the invisible one, the one who cleaned the floors and did the laundry, never the center of attention. But today was different. Today, she was stepping into a role she never imagined she would play. She had dressed in a simple yet elegant black dress, something modest yet fitting for the occasion. As she adjusted her hair, her nerves began to settle. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad. Maybe, just maybe, it could even be a little bit of freedom. She left her small room, making her way down the long corridors of the mansion. The house seemed quieter than usual, almost as if it were holding its breath. As she approached Vince's office, her heart began to race. He had said one day only. But Maya didn't know if she was ready for that. One day could feel like an eternity, especially with someone like him. Vince was everything she wasn't. He was power, authority, cold and calculating. And yet, there was something about him that intrigued her. The way he had looked at her yesterday, like he was seeing her for the first time, had stirred something in her. She couldn't deny the strange mix of fear and curiosity that had taken root inside her. When she knocked on his door, her breath caught in her throat. "Come in," he called out, his voice smooth and commanding. She pushed open the door and stepped inside. Vince was sitting at his desk, his sharp features illuminated by the soft glow of the desk lamp. His eyes briefly met hers before he motioned for her to sit. "Ready?" he asked, his tone neutral, but there was something in his eyes that made Maya feel like this wasn't just another day. This wasn't just a business deal. "Yes," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was answering him or herself. Vince stood up then, his tall frame casting a shadow across the room. He walked over to her, his movements deliberate, measured. For a moment, Maya wondered if she had made the right decision. Could she really go through with this? But then, Vince's gaze softened just a little, and Maya felt a sense of calm wash over her. "One day," he repeated softly. "Let's see what this brings." And just like that, Maya realized that whatever happened in the next few hours would change everything. For better or worse, her life would never be the same after today. The day unfolded with an air of tension that Maya couldn't shake. Everything felt different now. The house that had once seemed like a maze of walls and corridors filled with silence was now alive with purpose, each step she took seeming to echo in the stillness. She followed Vince, her heart racing in her chest. This wasn't just a charade anymore. It felt too real, too tangible. The tension between them was thick, palpable, as they walked together through the grand hall. Vince's steps were sure, confident, like he was always in control. Maya's were tentative, unsure. She had always been the one in the background, cleaning the rooms and serving the guests. But today, she was in the spotlight, and she wasn't sure how to act. It was surreal. As they entered the grand dining room, Vince spoke to the guests, his voice calm but authoritative. Maya stood to the side, feeling like an outsider, but still within the circle. She noticed the looks, the quiet murmurs. People were staring at them, watching the unusual scene unfold. They must have been wondering why the Mafia boss had brought a maid into his personal space, acting as if she belonged there. Vince seemed unfazed. He was used to the attention. But Maya, on the other hand, was hyper-aware of every gaze that fell upon her. She felt exposed in a way she never had before. The dinner was elegant, the silverware gleaming, the food beautifully plated. Maya had never seen such luxury up close. But even as the meal went on, she felt like a stranger in a foreign world. The moments when their hands brushed as Vince passed her a glass, or when he spoke directly to her, his voice commanding and yet strangely gentle, were the moments when Maya felt herself faltering. It was as if, in that brief interaction, she was allowed a glimpse into the world of power and wealth she could never have imagined. Yet, at the same time, she was reminded of her place. She was the maid, the one who served. She was still nothing more than that, no matter how much Vince's attention made her feel like something more. As the evening wore on, the guests began to leave, their conversations fading into the background. Vince's presence never wavered, his demeanor unshaken. But Maya began to feel the weight of the hours they had spent together. It had been a day of playing roles, of pretending to be something she was not. She was ready for it to end, ready for the mask to come off. But as the last guest left, Vince turned to her, his expression unreadable. "I said one day," he said, his tone soft yet firm. "But that doesn't mean it's over. You've shown me something today, Maya. Something I didn't expect." Maya looked at him, her breath catching in her throat. What was he saying? What did he mean by that? Vince took a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "I think," he continued, his voice steady, "there's more to this than I thought." Maya didn't know how to respond. She didn't know what he meant. But in that moment, standing in front of him, she realized that the one day she had asked for was not enough. Not for either of them. The days that followed felt like a blur to Maya. What had started as a simple request had shifted into something far more complicated than she could have ever anticipated. Vince's presence in her life had become a constant, a force that both unsettled and captivated her. Though their interactions had been brief, Maya couldn't help but feel a growing sense of tension between them, a tension that simmered just beneath the surface. She continued her duties at the mansion, cleaning and maintaining the household. But now there was an unspoken understanding between her and Vince. It wasn't just the way he looked at her when their eyes met across the room, or the way his voice softened when he spoke to her. It was more than that. It was the weight of his attention, the subtle shifts in his behavior that told Maya he was seeing her differently now. For the first time, she felt like she wasn't invisible. She could feel his gaze on her even when he didn't speak, and it unnerved her. The mansion had always felt cold to her, but now, it felt different. There was a shift in the air, a crackling energy that she couldn't ignore. It was as if Vince had pulled her into a world she wasn't ready for, but couldn't escape. One evening, after dinner had ended and the staff had left the room, Maya found herself alone in the kitchen, wiping down the counters. She was about to finish for the night when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned around to see Vince standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "You've been avoiding me," he said, his voice low. Maya froze, the dishcloth in her hand still as she looked at him. She started, but her words failed her. What could she say? That she had been trying to keep distance between them, that she was scared of what might happen if she didn't? But instead of retreating, she found herself standing there, rooted to the spot, her heart pounding in her chest. Vince stepped closer, his gaze never leaving her. He didn't say anything at first, just watched her, as if waiting for her to make the first move. Maya felt a strange pull, a magnetic force that seemed to draw her toward him. But she knew better than to cross that line. She had already seen enough of his world to know the dangers that came with getting too close. Yet, here she was, standing in front of him, unsure of what to do or say next. Finally, Vince broke the silence. You're not the only one with something to hide, he said quietly, almost to himself. Maya blinked, confused by his words. What do you mean? She asked softly. Vince's eyes softened just a little, a fleeting look that Maya barely caught. I'm not just the cold businessman you think I am. There's more to me, Maya. More than you realize. His words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Maya wasn't sure what he was trying to say, but she knew one thing for certain. Whatever was happening between them, whatever this was, it was changing her. And she wasn't sure if she was ready for the consequences. Vince turned and walked away, leaving Maya standing there in the quiet kitchen, her heart racing as she tried to process the weight of his words. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing on the edge of something much larger than she could understand. The door to the world she had once known was slowly closing, and in its place was a new world she wasn't sure she was ready to enter. But the pull was undeniable, and with each passing day, she found herself unable to turn away. The days after Vince's unexpected words in the kitchen felt heavy, like the calm before a storm. Maya tried to carry on with her usual duties, but the atmosphere in the mansion had shifted. Every interaction with Vince seemed charged with an unspoken tension, and no matter how hard she tried to keep her distance, she found herself drawn into his orbit more and more. One afternoon, as Maya was polishing the grand piano in the living room, Vince walked in, his footsteps echoing on the marble floor. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there for a moment, watching her. His gaze felt like it was peeling back layers of her, seeing right through her. Maya tried to ignore the flutter in her chest, focusing on her task, but the silence between them grew too loud to ignore. You don't have to pretend around me, Maya, Vince said finally, his voice low but steady. Maya froze, the cloth in her hand stilling against the piano. She wasn't sure what he meant, but the weight of his words hung heavy in the air. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Vince walked closer, his gaze never leaving her. I know what you're doing, he said softly. Trying to keep your distance. But I'm not just some boss you have to keep at arm's length. Not anymore. Maya's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't realized how much she had been trying to distance herself from him. She hadn't wanted to admit it, but in the days since their agreement, something had been shifting inside her. She couldn't stop thinking about him, about his words, about the way he had looked at her. I never meant to, Maya started, but she couldn't find the words to explain. What was she supposed to say? That she had never expected to be in this situation? That everything was moving too fast, too intensely? Vince stopped in front of her, just close enough for her to feel the heat from his body. I'm not asking you to change, Maya, he said, his voice calm. But you don't have to hide from me. Not anymore. Maya's heart raced as his words sunk in. She had never allowed herself to be vulnerable, to open up, but Vince was making it hard to keep everything locked away. He was making her feel things she didn't know how to handle. I'm just trying to get through the day, Maya murmured, her voice trembling slightly. I don't know what this is, what we're doing. Vince reached out, gently lifting her chin so she was looking up at him. For the briefest moment, their eyes locked, and Maya felt something stir inside her. It was a connection, something deeper than just their roles, something that neither of them had been prepared for. We don't need to have it all figured out, Maya, Vince said softly. But whatever this is, it's real, and we're in it together. Maya swallowed, trying to steady herself. His words were both comforting and terrifying. She didn't know what was happening between them, but she couldn't ignore it anymore. Vince's presence was becoming a part of her life, whether she was ready for it or not. I don't know if I can do this, Maya admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Vince's hand remained on her chin, his touch gentle. You don't have to do anything you're not ready for, he said, his tone reassuring. But don't shut me out. Don't push me away. Maya stood there, frozen in the moment, unsure of what to do next. Vince was right. She couldn't keep pretending that nothing was happening. She couldn't keep pretending that her feelings for him were just a side note. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she allowed herself to feel something. To believe that maybe, just maybe, there was more to life than the roles they had been playing. And maybe, just maybe, Vince Romano wasn't as far out of reach as she had once believed. The following days became a mixture of confusion and clarity for Maya. The walls of the mansion, once imposing and cold, now seemed more like a space filled with silent possibilities. Vince's words echoed in her mind. the weight of his touch lingering on her chin long after he had walked away. He had said they were in this together, and for the first time, Maya wasn't sure if that was a promise or a burden. She went about her days, continuing with her duties, but it was different now. There was a subtle shift in the way the staff looked at her, the way Vince looked at her. The constant weight of his gaze made her feel like she was both seen and invisible at the same time. She couldn't quite explain it. It wasn't just about the power dynamic anymore. It wasn't just about the fact that he was her boss, or the fact that she had once been nothing more than the maid in his mansion. No, there was something deeper now, something unspoken that neither of them seemed ready to acknowledge. One afternoon, as Maya was cleaning the hallway outside Vince's office, he emerged, his presence filling the space. He stopped when he saw her, and for a brief moment, they stood there, neither of them saying anything. Maya could feel her heart racing, unsure of what to do next. She had never been this close to him, never had to face him in such an intimate way. Maya, Vince finally said, his voice soft but firm. We need to talk. Her stomach flipped. She didn't know why, but she felt a pang of nervousness. She had already told herself that she wasn't going to get involved, that she wasn't going to let herself get too close. But now, standing in front of him, all those rules seemed meaningless. What's going on, Vince? She asked, her voice shaky. He studied her for a moment, and then, without warning, he reached for her hand. Maya didn't pull away. Instead, she let him take it, his touch warm and strong. You've been distant, he said quietly, and I need to understand why. Maya swallowed hard, trying to gather her thoughts. She had spent so long hiding behind the walls she had built for herself, trying to keep everyone at arm's length, especially him. But Vince wasn't just anyone. He was different. She could feel it. I'm just trying to do my job, Maya said, her words coming out in a rush. I don't want to complicate things. Vince's grip on her hand tightened slightly. It's already complicated, he said, his voice low. And I think we both know it. Maya's heart skipped a beat. She had no idea what to say to that. She had tried so hard to keep her feelings in check, to keep her distance, but it was impossible. With every passing day, she found herself thinking about him more and more. His presence, his touch, the way he spoke to her. It all seemed to make everything else fade away. What do you want from me, Vince? Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Vince took a step closer, closing the distance between them. His eyes locked onto hers, and in that moment, Maya saw something there, something that made her heart ache. I want you to stop pretending, he said softly. Stop pretending that we're not both feeling this. Stop pretending that this thing between us is just a game. Maya stood there, her breath caught in her throat. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know how to respond to him. All she knew was that she couldn't keep pretending anymore. She couldn't keep pretending that the way she felt about him was something she could just bury. I don't know if I can do this, Maya said, her voice barely audible. I don't know if I can let myself feel something for you. Vince's hand moved to her cheek, gently cupping her face. You don't have to know everything, Maya, he said, his voice tender. You just have to trust me. For the first time since they had met, Maya let herself lean into his touch, her eyes closing as she allowed herself to feel what she had been holding back for so long. Maybe Vince was right. Maybe she didn't have to have it all figured out. Maybe all she needed to do was trust him. And maybe, just maybe, that was the one thing she had been missing all along. The following days were filled with uncertainty for Maya, though a quiet sense of comfort began to settle over her, something she hadn't anticipated. Vince's presence in her life was undeniable now, and she could no longer pretend that it was simply a passing interaction. He had become a constant, a figure in her world that she both feared and craved. Every time their paths crossed, there was an unspoken understanding, a tension that neither of them fully acknowledged but both felt. Vince continued to be the boss, cold and calculating in the eyes of the world, but when it was just the two of them, he seemed softer, almost vulnerable in the quiet moments they shared. Maya had become accustomed to the long silences between them, moments where neither said anything but everything was understood. She knew that Vince was waiting for her to make the next move, to trust him fully. But every time she thought about doing so, her doubts resurfaced. She had never been someone who could easily let her guard down, especially not with someone like him. She had seen too much of the world he lived in, the danger, the secrecy, the control. And yet, she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him. The attraction was undeniable, But there was more to it than that. There was a quiet connection, something that went beyond the roles they played in each other's lives. It wasn't just about power, not anymore. It was about something deeper, something Maya wasn't sure she was ready to face. One evening, as she was finishing up her duties, she found herself standing in the living room, staring out at the view of the city. The night was clear, the lights of the city stretching out before her like a sea of stars. She heard the familiar sound of footsteps approaching, and her heart skipped a beat. She didn't have to turn around to know who it was. Vince stood behind her, his presence like a shadow. She could feel the weight of his gaze on her, and for a moment, neither of them said anything. The silence between them was thick, heavy with anticipation. Finally, Vince spoke, his voice low. "You've been distant," he said, his words cutting through the stillness. "And I need to know why." Maya's breath caught in her throat. She had tried so hard to avoid this conversation, to keep things light, to keep her emotions in check. But now, standing here with him, she realized there was no escaping it. "I'm not ready, Vince," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can be a part of this world. Your world." Vince took a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "You don't have to be part of my world, Maya. But you have to trust me. Trust that what's between us is real." Maya shook her head, unsure of how to respond. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust him, but the fear inside her was stronger than any of her desires. She had spent her life building walls, and now she was being asked to tear them down. "I don't know how to trust you," she said softly. "I've never known how to trust anyone." Vince reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. His touch was soft, almost tender. "You don't have to know everything right now," he said, his voice soothing. "You just have to take the first step." Maya closed her eyes, feeling the weight of his words settle in her chest. She had spent so long fighting against everything that was happening between them, but in this moment, she realized that maybe she didn't have to fight anymore. Maybe she could trust him, just for once. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. She opened her eyes and looked at him, her gaze steady. "Okay," she said, her voice stronger now. "I'll trust you." Vince's expression softened, and for the first time, Maya saw something in his eyes that wasn't cold or calculating. It was something warmer, something more human. He stepped forward and gently cupped her face in his hands, his touch tender. "That's all I've ever wanted, Maya," he said softly. "You don't have to do this alone. We're in this together." Maya nodded, her heart finally beginning to calm. She didn't know what the future held, but in that moment, with Vince's hands on her face and the city lights glowing behind them, she realized that for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel alone. As the days passed, Maya felt herself caught in a whirlwind of emotions, each moment with Vince drawing her further into a world she had never imagined for herself. The connection between them had grown deeper, stronger, and more undeniable with each passing day. She had come to realize that her feelings for him were not a fleeting attraction, but something much more profound, something that both terrified and excited her. She spent her days still working as the maid, going about her usual duties, but every time she crossed paths with Vince, there was an invisible thread between them, pulling her closer. It was like a quiet understanding, a bond that neither of them had explicitly acknowledged, but both knew existed. One evening, after the house had settled into its usual quiet, Vince found Maya standing by the window, looking out at the city below. The lights flickered like tiny stars scattered across the vast expanse. He approached her slowly, his footsteps soft on the marble floor. He didn't speak at first, just stood beside her, both of them looking out at the view. "Do you ever wonder what it would be like to leave all this behind?" Vince asked, his voice unexpectedly soft. Maya glanced at him, her heart racing at the depth of his question. It was something she had often thought about in the quiet moments, the escape, the freedom. But she had always believed it was impossible. "Sometimes," Maya replied, her voice barely a whisper. "But I don't think it's possible for people like me." Vince turned to her then, his expression serious. "You don't have to be like anyone else, Maya," he said, his voice low and steady. "You don't have to stay in the life you've been given. You can choose your own path." Maya shook her head, unsure of how to respond. She had never been given the luxury of choice, not in the way Vince was speaking of. Her world had always been one of survival, of making do with what she had. But now, standing here with Vince, a part of her longed for something more. I don't know if I can ever have that, she said, her voice breaking slightly. I don't know how to let go of everything I've built up, even if it's not much. Vince stepped closer, his presence filling the space between them. He reached out, gently cupping her face in his hands. You don't have to let go of everything, he said softly. But you deserve to have something for yourself, Maya. You deserve a life that's yours, not just one you've been given. Maya felt her breath catch in her throat as she looked into his eyes. There was sincerity in his gaze, a promise of something real, something beyond the walls of this mansion. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that there could be more for her outside of the role she had always played. What if I'm not strong enough? She whispered, the fear of the unknown clouding her thoughts. Vince's thumb gently brushed her cheek, his touch soothing. You are stronger than you think, he said, his voice filled with quiet certainty. And you're not alone in this. Whatever happens, I'll be here. Maya felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe in something other than fear. The future was still uncertain, still filled with unanswered questions, but standing here with Vince, she realized that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to face it alone. She didn't have to hold everything in, didn't have to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders by herself. With him by her side, there was hope, a flicker of something that could lead her toward the life she had always dreamed of but never thought possible. Vince's gaze softened as he took a step back, but his hand remained on her shoulder. I know it's not easy, he said, his voice quiet but firm. But we can figure this out together. Maya nodded slowly, her heart full of emotions she had never allowed herself to feel before. She wasn't sure what the future held, but in that moment, she realized that with Vince, she was willing to find out. Maybe this was the start of something new, something real, something worth fighting for.